moments in life. You lose someone, and get really sad. But after a few weeks, if 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 you want to stay in the sadness, it's your choice.
You think that that's a situation which you should be able to pull yourself out of? And I agree, but I
Yeah.
think what
I mean, if we want to get into the science of it,
Yeah.
Okay, let's go.
I.
Go ahead. Go
Your
ahead.
name?
Okay.
I'm Cecilia.
Nice to meet you, Cecilia.
Yeah. I actually, my degree is in psychology.
Oh, this is nice.
So-
We have school in here. We have school
So
up in
getting
here.
into the science of something like
Yeah.
anxiety or depression,
Yeah.
there is sort of the base level
Yeah.
of like humans. We have these emotions for a reason. Like anxiety, okay, when we were, hunter-gatherers, anxiety helps us because it's like, oh, I'm looking for a predator. Oh, I'm looking for danger. It's a good instinct to have. And, same with depression. It actually helps, being sad, missing people. It's about building connections in a community. If you miss someone, it's part of building those connections.
Yeah.
But as we evolve, as we build into the societies that we have now, some people keep, sort of a base level where it's easy for them to experience that emotion and then pull themselves out of it. Some people actually have higher levels of the chemicals that cause those emotions. So like for depression, people who are chronically depressed have lower levels of serotonin and have a harder time absorbing dopamine, which is the chemical that makes you happy. It's released, when you like have a food that you really like, or when you're with someone you really like, dopamine is released. And people who have chronic depression have either lower levels of that chemical or a harder time absorbing it.
Okay.
So chronic depression, chronic anxiety are medical conditions. And if you live in a society where seeking medical help for a medical condition of the mind is not accepted, then it's much harder for you to just pull yourself out of it like a person who has normal dopamine receptors or a normal level of serotonin would.
So, do you think giving someone with chronic depression, as you say, less dopamine, if I got you correctly, if you were to give them pills or whatever type of way to give them more dopamine, do you think that would then cure the chronic depression?
I think it depends. I think for something like depression, yes, something like an SSRI, which is
We don't know what that is. So,
serotonin reuptake inhibitor.
Yeah.
It's a drug that basically, when your brain releases serotonin, your two synapses, okay, this one releases, this one accepts.
Okay.
And then the one that releases reabsorbs all the excess.
Okay.
So this inhibitor stops it from reabsorbing that excess so more can get to the next one and you can keep passing those chemicals along. That's good. That's going to help you. But it also requires something like therapy to go with it to help you sort of learn how to process that, because just messing with the chemicals in your brain, you're just messing with chemicals without teaching someone how to handle that. And that's just like doing drugs. It's just messing with chemicals, and that's not going to help someone long term, because then when they go off these drugs, they're just going to go right back down. And so something like therapy is needed in addition to those pills. And some people stay on them for the rest of their lives because that's what they need. Some people take the pills for a while, have therapy, learn new coping skills, and are able to eventually stop taking those drugs because they have a better understanding of themselves and they're more able to process those depths of emotion.
yeah. So I will say as well, another controversial opinion of mine is that I agree with you halfway. I think chronic depression can be cured or is caused by lack of information or lack of knowledge, to say it. So, giving an example, lack of knowledge of knowing yourself. So, I'll give the example: if somebody, if somebody from a young age has never been taught how to handle their anger, and they grew up just like that, when they reach a point where maybe even worse, they go through a traumatic experience and never been taught how to handle sadness, they look for the first thing that will take it away, which most likely leads to them going to vices, alcohol, drugs, sex, most guys.
Hey, girls too, feminism.
True, yes, that is true. They just try to find something to take it away instead of dealing with it. So I think from someone who suffers chronic depression, they lack the knowledge. Maybe they are there because they don't know what to do.
I do think that's true.
So do you think if they did know what to do, they wouldn't have depression?
No, I do think that, well, I think it depends on the person, right? I think some people,
especially if they know themselves. If they know, I need to do this to make myself happy.
The ability and the resources to get to know themselves.
Yeah, so but if they did know themselves and how to help themselves.
Knowing yourself and how to help yourself can be very different.
And I also think, like, again, it comes down to a genetic component, right? Like, I grew up in a very mental health friendly family, in a family that taught me how to process my emotions from a young age. I still went through a period of chronic depression because it's in my family history. It's a genetic thing. So I was very lucky in that when I went through that period, I had a family who was going to support me, take me to therapy, put me on medications that would help. And without those, even though I grew up in a family where I was taught all of these coping skills, I don't know that I would have been able to come out of that depression because I needed that extra help. It was a genetic, it was a chemical thing. It wasn't, that I didn't know myself or that my family wasn't supportive.
So I guess we can both agree that it just depends on who the person is, I guess. Because I can say I know people or myself are from a background where we don't have chronic depressive tolerant people, where they don't understand it. If you were to tell your parents I'm depressed, they'll be like, what are you talking about? You're just hungry, go eat something. But they don't understand it, So you have to find a way to deal with what you're going through. Most people in African homes turn to God. So there are people that with no medication just say, I'm gonna go to church and pray a lot.
That's a particularly hard thing to do.
And God will save me.
Coming from like the United States, which is a place that is very recently trying to understand mental health. And then coming to Africa, in which like in Zambia, in rural villages, they're not there yet.
Yeah.
They're not trying to understand mental health. They have so many different predeterminers that are far more impactful and have been chosen as like important areas. And to be like explain anxiety in another language when people are like, I'm worried about the harvest and a lack of water and a lack of millie meal.
But I think it's also very interesting in Africa, especially in these rural areas, that the support systems are very different. Like in the US, it's very focused on a nuclear family. You don't have that extended family, you don't have that support. And I think that does, to an extent, contribute a lot to things like anxiety and depression in the United States, at least for the people where it's less of like a, chemical genetic thing and a more of not having that support. I think people, at least that I've met in Africa, they have the support of not just their parents or their siblings, but aunts, uncles, cousins, everybody is there. Everyone, the whole community is there to support you. They have their church. Everyone in the church is there to support you. And I think that is a really great thing here that is not as focused on in the US. And I don't think that, solves every problem. I still think there's depression. I still think there's anxiety here. I've met people who experience those kind of feelings long term. But I do think that in the US, we sometimes rely more on medication, on things that could be helped just by having more support.
So I have a very hard question. If you would like to hear this hard question,
He's raising.
are you? You do have the school knowledge for this, so I guess. So how would you handle somebody or a patient that came to you? Let's say a teenage girl that told you, I am very sad. Oh no. Oh, let me tell you. I'll make this harder. Let me tell you, a young girl who comes to you and tells you, "I am lesbian. I am lesbian. I love women, and I hate men. Men should never touch me. Yeah, like I don't want any man in my life ever. Yeah, they shouldn't be close to me." Then you find out this girl was sexually molested when she was like 11 or 12 by like a man, and she kept that and she didn't know how to handle it. So she was just like, "I don't want to deal with men." Yeah.
I mean,
What would be your road to recovery plan for this girl?
I mean, I think it depends. For one, who is the abuser? Is it someone who's still in her life?
Yes.
Say like an uncle, a cousin, someone that the family is still supporting.
Yes.
Because in that
And worse, we do have African homes where the uncle is protected because they do not want the family name to be dragged under the mud.
yeah, I mean,
Just tell the girl, just forget about it,
yeah, I think that's a real problem, not just here, but
Oh, sure.
in the US too. Like,
Okay.
yeah, a family who won't believe this girl, who will close ranks around the abuser, rather than think that, oh, this man, this paragon of our family, would do something bad. It must be the girl who's lying, or maybe she tempted him.
Dressed in a certain way, yeah.
Maybe she was doing something wrong, and so it's not his fault. I think the first thing is to tell a girl like that, it's not your fault.
Okay.
You,
Whose fault then?
yeah,
Whose
it's
fault is
the
that?
abusers. You never.
It's the abuse.
There's no situation in which a man should touch you without your consent,
Very true.
without explicit consent. And there's no situation in which a man who's 40 should be interested in a girl who's 16. Like, that's a child.
Yeah.
And I think the very first thing in a situation like that is to work with this girl to help her understand that she is not at fault.
Okay.
And that if there's a way to get her out of that situation, maybe an extended family member who lives in a different village, even in a different province, that she could stay with, that might be a good solution in the short term, just to get her out of the abuser's zone of protection.
Okay.
And from there, I think it's important that the girl has regular counseling, either like at my clinic, I work at a rural health clinic. We have one of our nurses who's trained in counseling for victims of gender-based violence. So I think accessing resources like that is very important, because you're not going to be able to heal if you just are stuck in that situation. You need to first be separated from the situation and then have the support and care in order to heal. So yeah, I think that would be, the first steps. And then from there, continuing to reevaluate as the girl has more space, has more time, has more support, and kind of seeing where it goes. Because from there, she could say, I still think I'm a lesbian and I still never want a man to touch me.
Yeah.
And really, that's okay. She had a bad experience. She was traumatized. If she never wants to be with a man ever again, that should be her right.
This must be the wildest edition of the
what is-
Old Crow podcast. However, we do have to go.
No.
Ceci, and go.
You had a time.
Ceci?
It's Ceci time.
Yep.
No,
You're
Ceci.
right.
You also had a time, but I think we should leave.
Give me like a little while.
I don't think you've answered this question.
Okay.
No, where were we? So I agree with you. I think what I have a problem with is I'm very supportive and will help someone and do what I can to get them out of the spot of depression or anxiety. But I'm not a big fan of people that choose to stay in depression and anxiety, where you offer them the help, you give them all the advice, you tell them what to do, and they refuse it multiple times. Where you've told them this is what's gonna help you. Let's work it out. Let's try to get there.
But sometimes that's not what they need. Like, I've worked in the mental health field for a long time. There's people who you give them every little thing. You give them all the support you think that they need, and they stay, depressed, they stay anxious, they're not able to move on from that. And then it's, maybe something that you totally didn't expect that pulls them out of it. Because you, ultimately, I don't think, unless you're into witchcraft, I don't think you're a mind reader. I'm not a mind reader.
No, yeah.
We can't always know what it is that's going to take someone, that what help someone needs. And I think it can really feel frustrating for us as the people on the outside to say, I've done all the things that I think that I can think of, and you're still depressed, you're still anxious, but maybe all the things you're thinking of aren't what they needed in that moment. And ultimately, it's not your fault. Like, you tried your best, but it's also not necessarily their fault. Like, if they were especially raised in a culture where they're not able to articulate what it is they need, they might not even know what it is they need until that thing happens. So, like, I can understand how that's really frustrating, but I also don't think we should blame people, because blaming them and saying, oh, I've tried to give you all this help and you're still depressed, so I'm just done with you. I think that is ultimately not helpful, because just being there and just being a support when they need it is going to be so valuable to them when they do find that thing, when they are able to get to a place. Having your support through that whole process will have been so valuable, and you might not be able to see it, but I think long term, just supporting someone unconditionally might be the best thing you can do for them.
Yeah. Well, on that topic, I mean, I do believe it's a little harder for men with this topic. I did have a friend that told me, he had depression and was taking pills for them. I wouldn't deny I laughed at first. I was like, what are you talking about? Like, are you serious? And laughed a little some more. And then, like, he actually sent me the picture of the pills that he needed to take every day to feel better. And I was like, that's crazy, man. You taking pills to feel better? That is I kind of laughed at him a bit. But after all the laughter, I told him I don't think he needs the medicine. Yeah, I just told him I think you just need a good support system, change maybe certain habits or remove yourself from the environment, and you'll be okay. You'll be okay. After a couple months, he was okay. I think he said the medicine was kind of making him a little worse.
Yeah, that is one thing about especially older model drugs for depression, is they'll get you to a certain point, but then you sort of plateau.
Yeah.
And for some people, that plateau means they've gotten back up out of the pit and it might be time to start weaning off. For some people, it might mean they need to switch drug regimes, try something new in order to balance out. But that is actually a known problem with, especially something like Prozac, an older drug used to treat depression. So that is a legitimate problem that a lot of people face when they are on medicine.
So how would you deal with the scenario where
Now? Okay.
Just a little bit. Should be coming.
I'll come in a little bit.
So if in a hypothetical world where we were both married and we had kids, and one of the kids told us, hey mom, I have depression, mom and dad, I have depression, then I, with my African views, told you I don't want my kids to take medicine for this. We got God and each other, we don't need that. I assume you would be like, we should give them something.
Especially for kids, I think that therapy is a first line treatment. I think that you should try multiple therapists to find one that fits and works out with your child best. I think if you're raising your children religious, finding a pastor, finding a priest who can counsel them is a better first line treatment. I think medication in children should be the very, very last resort. when you've tried everything else under the sun and your kid is still in a position where they're not able to enjoy life, they're, maybe considering suicide, that's when you should look to medication for kids. And I think even in adults, I think therapy should be the first try, or religious counseling, whatever the patient feels most comfortable with. Also, if we were married, you would do what I say.
There we go.
So-
That is a little scary, but okay, I hear you.
Hey, if you're gonna flirt with me, just know.
I think in that opinion we would bump heads because I would also want you to do what I want. Or compromise, 50-50.
50-50. We can
Reach an
compromise.
agreement somewhere.
I think for us to have 100, not 50-50. But everybody has to bring in their own thing. But here's the question now. You, being a Zambian, I'm sure you understand this trending thing which is going on, where they say we don't judge, but we just watch. I was listening to radio this morning that in the health sector, like nurses, what they are doing now is like they are making fun of.
Yeah, continue. Don't.
I just got it.
Yeah, like nurses, they're making fun of patients and stuff. Like some patients are dying. There's a guy who just testifies, my relative died because of the nonsense stuff that the other guys are doing. Yeah, they are just saying, we are just watch. We don't judge. Okay, they are making fun of it. I might not have the full genesis of this whole situation, but now looking at you being that person who is in mental health issues, how much are you training, or you will train the fellow students who are coming up there to keep secrets, or maybe to keep to understand someone who is coming to them?
Like coming to clinicians.
Yeah.
I do think that a lot of patients, at least that we see in the rural setting, it's a very close-knit community. If someone sees you going to the clinic, they're going to gossip about it. And I think it is really important.
That's what I'm thinking about. Recipe,
I think it is really important that nurses are trained in strict confidentiality. Because if your sister is in the village and you're a nurse at a clinic and you get maybe their daughter or something in, and then you immediately go and tell your sister, none of the daughter or any of her friends are going to come back to the clinic again because they know, this nurse is just going to tell my parents. So I think it is important to train nurses in confidentiality and in, making sure that they're not gossiping, because it might seem harmless. You might just think, I'm telling this person because I'm worried about this kid or I'm worried about this patient, but you could be putting that patient in a worse situation.
That's a good point. On that regard, I was listening to that. I don't know if you know the trend he's talking about.
Like social media?
Yeah, social media.
TikTok?
And Twitter, especially. Yeah, where we want to listen to you, but we won't judge. Yeah, and I think one of the nurses was like, I let the patient die, and I was drunk, so my bad.
Yeah.
But don't judge,
Yeah, I'm not really on social media. So any trend, I'm about 5 years behind.
Oh, okay. Why is it so? Why in social media?
I'm just, I guess, old-fashioned. I don't understand it.
Like reading or studying?
I was very studious in college. So then by the time I graduated, TikTok had already happened. Or was already happening, and I just didn't get on it because I was like, I'm not even messing with this.
So what can you tell me? Who is that addict, like media addict?
I think digital detox is something that I've seen as a trend that I think is really important. Like, you turn off your phone for maybe 2 hours a day. About to text, freaking out the phone when we're talking digital detox. Yeah, I think it's like you start, turn off your phone 1 hour a day, or leave it in your house, go for a walk, do something else. Get it out of your line of sight, away from you.
On our closing remarks, as our producer,
Yeah,
apparently
I'm getting the axe.
is now out of energy and would like to kill the night. Last question is, I'll just ask you if, for the guys listening to wherever this is going, I don't know where this is going, or myself exactly, what advice would you give them if they're like chronically depressed and the friends will make fun of them, the family will tell them they're a man and should deal with it, and their girlfriend might leave them if they do?
Well, for one, if your girlfriend leaves you when you confide in her, she's a bitch. Like, come on now.
Yeah, he's listening.
But I think, like, seek support where you can, whether it's a clinic in your area, whether it's a therapist, whether it's even, a religious figure in your community. If you have a priest that you trust or an elder in your church that you trust, that will keep it confidential and that will advise you. I think seeking help is always the best option. And if that's outside of your family, if that maybe even is outside of your community, that's okay, but you shouldn't suffer alone. And suffering alone is just going to make things worse, because once you talk about it, once it's out there, you can start to process it, you can start to heal, you can start to move towards, a better place.
Okay, that is very good advice.
Okay. I'm getting poked
Yeah, I can see.
and told to leave.
I can see.
So,
My closing.
You? Thanks very much, Ceci.
it was nice to meet you.
Meet you soon. We'll see you.
Thank you.
Let's close with him now.
I have to leave with them.
Yeah, like you need to tell us your closing remarks. I know you can summarize it.
My summary is, be a man. Deal with it. Okay, I'm joking. My closing remarks is just, so see, 1 minute before you go. My closing remarks would just be, as she said, find yourself a support group.
Yeah, standing on the camera.
Oh shit, yeah. My closing remarks is find a good support group. Always know.
Like she has said.
Yeah, always know it gets better. It can't get any worse. You're already depressed. So. And trust in the Lord. Thank you for having me. My name is David. Yeah.
Good. Thanks for hosting.
All right. Yeah.
I wish to see you next time.
Yeah. You have a good night.
Cheers, man. So thank you very much to our viewers and listeners. Bye-bye.